This is Envision Self-Healing Podcast, episode number 46. Hi, I'm Will Fuller.
And I'm Richard Miller.
And we are the co-creators of EnvisionSelfHealing.com and are dedicated in helping you improve your eyesight and quality of life
by taking healing into your own hands. The topic of the week this week is 5 Steps to a Successful New Year's Resolution, Part 4, Have It Be Relevant. And in the question of the week, we are dealing with what is the difference between the Envision Self-Healing approach to vision improvement and the See Clearly method. We've gotten this question from a lot of people.
So, Richard, how's the world of self-healing been treating you this week?
Well, I'm continuing on with my push to become Iron Man, I guess. So not that Iron Man, but an Iron Man in my world anyway.
A real Iron Man.
Yeah. So I've been going to the gym regularly, going to my trainer, going to spin classes regularly. Mm-hmm. Although I think I said last time I've become this jinx to spin classes because they seem to... the stereo breaks or the teacher doesn't show up or something like that. So anyway, I seem to have gotten over being the jinx.
Okay, good.
But I've been quite sore. I mean, it's realistic for someone who's not been exercising to that level.
Yeah, well, how many times a week are you exercising now?
I like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But
I think even if someone was used to exercising, you're still going to feel sore.
Right. Well, the interesting thing my trainer said, and this fits in with what we do considerably, is that it's a more holistic approach. He was saying, and this worked with the upper body work I did, but not with the lower body, which was if you take care of your whole body, so if you're taking in the right amounts of water, if you do the nutrition right, you're going to be less sore than if you didn't do that.
Right.
And that makes sense to me, to not isolate out muscle soreness from your entire health of your body. I appreciated that as opposed to saying, well, you're just going to get sore.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it. So, but I got quite sore. Mainly, no, not my upper body, but my lower body.
Right, you were focusing on. And today you did spin class and then some TRX.
TRX, yeah. It's mainly my legs that have been really, really sore. So
you were saying that you sort of hit a wall.
I did. You're right.
Today.
I did hit a wall today. Just exhaustion at a certain point. And, of course, the woman who inspired me to go to this was next to me, and I was completely embarrassed that she kept going, and I was exhausted and laying on the floor. But
so did you find it demotivating when you hit that wall? Did it encourage you to want to exercise more?
It wasn't demotivating. I mean, I could see that happening. That I could almost visualize. When it happens, you go, "Oh, I can see where somebody goes. I'm too old." Like you could say, there's this period where you're going to judge that exhaustion, and your mindset comes into play. And I could almost see if you had the mindset, well, people get old, you're not up to this.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room was, when I think about it, was at least 20 years younger than me.
Okay.
Well, maybe 15. So I was definitely the oldest person there. So it would be very easy to develop that mindset of, oh, I am not doing well in this class. I'm too old for it. I'm going to go to the senior center and take exercise.
And go play bowls.
Yeah. Maybe take a waltz class or something like that, you know? Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. Sorry about that, folks.
We're just saying that Richard is choosing the more, vigorous spin class approach, and there's no reason. Was that the oldest guy to run a marathon? Was he 99 or 100?
Yeah.
In New York. So if he can run a marathon, there's no reason why you should be able to do your spin class and your TRX.
Right. I mean, there is... this is a hard thing to address because there is the reality that we do age. We do have things that come into play.
Yeah.
But the mental process of setting a limit, I could see it there as I'm laying there on the floor panting. I'm like, I could interpret this situation as, this is too much.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, though, is you could get, especially in today's world, sadly, and more so in the Western society, with the high rates of obesity, you could have a 21-year-old who couldn't achieve half of what you're trying to do in a spin class.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So that goes to show that, that aspect of it, it really isn't. At what point is it really age? Like if you had a really fit 60-year-old and a really fit 21-year-old, then maybe you could make those direct comparisons.
Exactly, yeah.
But I don't think you could make a generalization of maybe in the past when there was a lot more manual labor and people had to be fit all the time. But I don't know whether that is necessarily the case anymore. I mean, I know when I ran my half marathon with my dad to raise some money for the Royal National Institute of the Blind and to also prove that we could run half marathons and all the rest of it, most of the men there were like 2-3 times my age.
Yeah.
And they were hours ahead of me.
Good. I like that story.
But it's, it just dawned on me then that, more people are dying from obesity than they are from malnutrition now in the world. Mm-hmm. And, at what point now are we saying that really age is a limitation only in an extreme environment?
Yeah. So, but it was interesting to face that moment of, do I decide that this is too much for me?
Right.
And it really wasn't, I didn't even get close to saying this is too much for me.
Right.
Although I couldn't continue that day. So, this morning. So,
yeah. And I think what we discussed before, because we were talking about the war and talking about marathons and stuff. And you really could see it, the wall, as it's a point where you run out of glycogen and energy, and then your body transports over into a higher energy system. And if you're not used to using that,
right,
then you hit this point, this limitation.
Yeah.
So the more you train, the more you make your body efficient, and you start avoiding the wall, and it goes back and back and back.
And it does seem like at some point it's a mental. I guess in my life I haven't challenged that the point where oxygenation isn't quite enough.
Okay.
I've backed away from that. And that I think is mental, or it's not quite mental. It's almost like spiritual or something. It's like, or just experience with dealing with that. I guess that's the wall, the oxygenation wall, let's call it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably also, it's not just that. I mean, I'm quite in there. It's probably about 5-10 years ago, the last time I studied that. So I'm sure there's a lot more to it. But also, the body's ability to deal with lactic acid.
Right.
Taking in enough oxygen, the heart being able to pump enough blood, and all of that improves over time.
Right.
There is your limit, which is why we're doing this, setting a realistic goal. And last week we talked about it being attainable, because there are limits.
Right.
To what we can do at that point in time. It doesn't mean that eventually down the road you might not reach that goal. And I think somebody that respects the fact that you are going to hit those walls, but the longer you do it, the better you're going to improve, and the better off for it you're going to be, then I think you're more likely to stay at it.
No, it was an interesting, and actually, I thank you for pointing out that experience, because I kind of skipped over the fact that I didn't jump to that conclusion, and it actually feels kind of good that I didn't.
Yeah.
So,
good.
Yeah. So how was your week?
Good. I said last week I spent the week trying to focus on obstruction, and I'm obstructed again this week. And I spent a good large percentage of my time obstructing my stronger eye. And I've noticed before I would obstruct the eye, as soon as I took the glasses off, maybe a couple of minutes, I would start feeling a bit of strain in my right eye as it takes over again. I've noticed now towards the end of this week that when I'm getting so used to using the weaker eye now, that when I take the glasses off, I feel like I need almost to do some convergence exercises. Like it's so engaged that I need to now work to fuse that single image and have it equal. It's fascinating. I've not really spent much time with it. That's only been in the last few days have I observed that feeling.
That I've hit this point before. I've hit this exact point before. I've never discussed it with you, but now that you say that, it's all coming back. That as I took off the glasses, again, my left eye would engage, and it's like your left eye. It's not as good an eye. It's got its problems. And there'd be a point where like, wow, they're both really equal and they're working together. And then you want to do that. You want to do some sort of fusion exercise at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of I wouldn't say it's necessarily an improvement in acuity, because I think that's pretty unachievable with the cataracts and the...
Could be, yeah.
And the
pseudomacular hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly the feeling, it was like my left eye was all of a sudden part of the game. I guess being a PE teacher, a physical education teacher, I could think of maybe a kid that's been left on the sidelines for a couple of games, and then all of a sudden...
the fat kid's on the bench. Oh, sorry, fat kid, sorry.
And then, well, not necessarily fat, maybe.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I went there.
The ability wasn't as good.
Yeah.
But I feel like that kid's allowed to join back in the game again and is involved all of a sudden. And so that weaker eye is feeling more engaged, and it feels like it's part.
Yeah, and if you let the kid on the bench play for a while, then he becomes equal to the other people on the bench.
Yeah, so I've started to, instead of seeing it as maybe one good eye and then one bad eye, maybe the better eye is now trying to coach the weaker eye into maybe being in par, and maybe it might never be there, but at least it's equal, and it means the right eye is rested a lot more. And I have noticed an improvement in my periphery since I've engaged that left eye. It's like I've gained I've gained the periphery in that eye, that my brain is normally using my stronger eye and only the peripheral vision in that stronger eye. Right. Choosing it.
Right.
So now, and what's so good is I don't have, other than the RP that's in both eyes, I don't have the cataracts in my periphery, and I don't have the pseudomacular hole in my periphery.
Right.
So in theory, my two peripheries are pretty equal. But I've not been using it because my brain has been switching off that weaker eye because of the left vision.
Well, and that, I think we've talked about this before. If you have any defects, it's a weird phenomenon that the brain will quickly turn off something that has a moderate defect. It doesn't have to be like severe. Yeah. So that's what you're dealing with. Just if your central vision is compromised, the brain isn't sophisticated enough to go, well, I'm only turning off the central vision. It turns off the entire eye. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could just imagine over time, it gets a weaker and weaker signal.
Right.
And then just less information is being processed by the brain, by that part of the eye. I did notice that because what I do is when I use my non-dominant eye, I blow up the screen. Right. So I'm, or my weaker eye, so that I'm able to see it better and actually function. And even the fact that I'm able to do that is actually an achievement, I feel. And I noticed that if I then uncover the stronger eye and use the screen as it is, then the two eyes are sort of working together a lot more. But as soon as I shrink the text beyond the point that the weaker eye can function equally, then my stronger eye takes over.
Interesting.
Straight away, because I physically can't see that text with my weaker eye.
Interesting.
So I think that it certainly argues to not be using the computer, and that when I'm out and about, it's a lot more equal because I'm not trying to read tiny text on a screen. I'm looking at a tree, which both eyes are seeing equally.
Right.
Whereas if I'm looking at text, then there's even bigger conflict between the two eyes. So anyway, I've been playing with that this week, and some interesting observations. So I'm going to do it again. Or last week, I hit that point, as I normally do with the exercises, where I'm like, I can't believe I've not been doing this all along. Like, how could I ever have not been obstructing as much time as what I do, and been putting my stronger eye under so much strain? It almost seems criminal that I would do that to my own vision. But there you go. I'd rather figure it out now than a couple more years down the line. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It can be frustrating. It can also bring up a lot of difficult emotions. I'm slower working because I can't. It takes me longer to read an article or to write an email.
Right.
It's not easy by all means, but I feel like I'm progressing with it, and I'll see how we are next week.
It's kind of like your visual wall you're sort of hitting.
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely exactly the same as what you're achieving. And And then when you can take the glasses off, you could see it. You could be like, wow, the vision in my right eye is so much better. Why would I even try and use
Right.
my weaker eye? Let's just stay with what is good.
Yeah.
And not push myself. I guess the same as you could have just gone to an easier exercise class.
Right.
Or you could go to a class that's got, elderly seniors in it.
Right.
And in that point, you would be like a hero. You'd be like, wow, look at me. You'd be like, let's keep going, guys. What do you mean you're going to quit?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. Good.
So I think that's a good time to move on to topic of the week.
And the topic of the week this week is 5 Steps to a Successful New Year's Resolution, Part 4. Is it relevant?
So over the weeks here, we've been using the SMART approach to obtaining a goal and setting yourself a goal. And this week we're looking at whether it's realistic or not. So a good example would be...
Relevant or not, sorry.
Sorry, relevant.
Yes.
So a good example of that would be, I guess, what you're trying to achieve. So for me, I'm looking to improve my peripheral vision.
Right.
So it would make sense that my goal would be relevant to that.
Right. But you've, in some ways, are picking a sort of, it's not really a side goal, it's a supportive goal. Mm-hmm. So for you, the eye strain on your right eye, well, in some ways it's really relevant because you were having strain and pain and tiredness by not obstructing your left eye, your right eye, and using your left eye. So it was really relevant, whereas the RP is definitely relevant, obviously. Mm-hmm. But in some ways it has a longer horizon or timeline, and you are dealing with it as well. Mm-hmm. So I can see how this particular goal for you is extremely relevant, because if you didn't address it, you'd be dealing with more strain, tiredness. You almost couldn't do your job.
Yeah. And I think in the beginning we said that the goal I was using as an example overall was to do an hour and a half of eye exercises a day, and that goal is relevant because I've not said 6 hours of eye exercise. I guess that's more the attainable side of things, but it's relevant to my life, what it is that I'm actually trying to do.
Well, and for you, you have a genetic degenerative disease. So an hour and a half, we were talking this morning, may not even be quite enough, but as a goal anyway, is super relevant to your life. Whereas someone, say, has, let's see, what could it be? Presbyopia. An hour, it's to set a goal of, I have to do an hour and a half a day, and half of that's going to be peripheral work. It's not relevant to them.
Yeah.
So it's gone into you choosing your goal and how you're going to attain those goals too. So.
Yeah. And I guess from a fitness standpoint, always seems a bit easier to use the analogy. If someone's training for cycling, as we were talking before, to do a cycling race, the Tour de France, then they wouldn't run the streets every day. It needs to be relevant. They need to get on a bike and actually train in doing that.
Right. And my goal of becoming aerobically fit, and in fact, it's even a little bit of a niche for me. Like, aerobically fit really is my goal, not weight loss or any of those aspects of the spin class and things like that I'm doing. It really is totally. It doesn't sound relevant in the beginning from the outside, but from my perspective, getting the circulation better to my eyes is as relevant as I could get in terms of optic atrophy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I certainly took heed of that, actually, what you said, and I actually went for my first run of the year on Sunday, and the week just gone and couldn't walk for about 2 days afterwards. But I certainly, the idea that exercising is actually, an eye exercise.
yeah.
And I know that the more blood I can get to my retina, then the stronger it's going to be, and the healthier my retina is going to be. It's just common sense.
Yes.
So, running for myself is also relevant to trying to improve my condition.
Yeah, and I think a lot of eye conditions have to do with blood circulation. A lot of eye conditions, they actually don't know exactly what causes them, but blood circulation is certainly a part of most of them.
Yeah.
So, and it just happens to be optic atrophy it's very relevant to that, but it's really relevant to a lot of them.
So just ask yourself the eye exercises that you're doing. Are they relevant to what it is that you're trying to achieve, or is your goal relevant? And of course, as you could just hear with Richard and I's goals, it's not just about, setting this goal for eye exercises. I know for a lot of new clients, we look at maybe doing 40 minutes a day, or at least just trying to do the program or doing the exercises. No matter how length of time, just trying them that day, but do it for a full week. That's relevant to, I guess, their final goal, which is to read, the 20, 40 line or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. So by doing those exercises on a regular basis is obviously relevant to what they're achieving. So there's certainly different ways of going about this to find out what it is that's relevant to you and what it is that you actually want to achieve in your goal.
Right. And I think there's two aspects of it. It's like the relevance relates to, okay, this is my condition. Let's say I have myopia. So distance looking is the most relevant exercise to that. And it's got a close association, since myopia, in our view, has been at least partially caused by looking close all the time. Looking in the distance is the opposite. So that's a kind of relevance. There's a connection there between the two.
Yeah.
The other relevance that I would say is this goal relevant to something that would be enjoyable or desirable in my life? So for someone, again, with myopia, maybe they're, I really hate wearing my glasses, or I'd like to only wear them when I draw, there's a something they get out of it, basically.
Yeah.
And for me, of course, seeing clear because of blood circulation is something, or, being able to function a little better, read a little better. Those are things I get out of the goal that I enjoy, that are very close to my heart to a certain degree. Maybe it's the relevance aspect of being close to your heart. So
yeah, like maybe if you had a 16-year-old kid doing eye exercises because they want to prevent presbyopia. They're looking at a good 20 or 30 years before they... obviously it's good to do it in practice to prevent it, but probably more relevant for a modern day child would be to try and avoid myopia, or indeed improve their myopia. So making it relevant and close enough to you, making it personal, I guess.
Yeah.
So that you're more likely to achieve it.
Yeah.
And it's easier to get that motivation because it's always there pushing you, because it's in plain sight, excuse the pun.
Yeah. And I guess that's where we would discourage someone. And there are people we meet some people like this that say, I want to have 20/20 vision, and I'm going to do eye exercises to get that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit abstract, and it's like there aren't that many people who will support that necessarily around you. So you're kind of on this island saying, I want perfect vision. And you have to come up with like, well, why do I want better vision? Like I want to be able to play bridge without my glasses. Something that is relevant to your personal life, that gives you some motivation to go forward.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's sort of like learning a language too. And certainly there are people who, it's their goal to learn Latin, right? But to a lot of people, like, I live in California, learning Spanish, I could actually meet people who speak Spanish. Like, you can come up with relevant reasons for learning Spanish.
And then the more you use it, the more likely you are to be able to remember it and keep proceeding with your language development.
Yeah. So you get support, you get motivation, you get to use it. It creates enjoyment, all of those things. Certainly, if you learned Latin, you could create a scenario where that's relevant to somebody else to learn Latin. So, they wanted to read Dante in the original language or something like that. So
yeah, I guess, and I suppose a lot of people, I know somebody that learned Japanese, lived in the UK, you could say, well, unless this person is working for a Japanese company or is living over there, why would he do it? And it was because that he did Aikido.
Yeah.
So he was doing it partially. He wanted to learn it so he could learn his martial arts method that much more.
Deeply,
so it was relevant to him.
Yep.
Whereas for him to have learned Spanish wouldn't have been as relevant.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, the fourth part there then out of the 5-step method of goal setting, make your goal relevant. So we recommend now that to build on the specific, measurable, attainable, and now relevant. So add that to your list of the goal that you're trying to create there, and write down some reasons why the goal that you've chosen, why it's relevant, and how you can actually make it relevant to what it is that you want to achieve.
Yep.
All right, great. I think that's a good time to move on to question of the week.
And the question of the week this week is kind of a composite of a bunch of questions we've gotten over a little more recently, actually. And it is, how is your approach different than the See Clearly method? It was this very highly publicized method about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so for those of us, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of the See Clearly method, and I wasn't around in the States when this came around, so I hadn't actually heard of it previously. But if you could let our audience a little bit more information into what it's all about.
Yeah, so I was around, obviously, and I was seeing Mayer Schneider at the time. I had been seeing him for maybe 6 or 7 years at the time that the radio commercials came out. And I was always curious how this was different. And quite honestly, because I was getting success with Mayer Schneider, I never bothered to look into it, but it was always a curiosity of mine. And then I guess it's 2006, it went out of business. And I at that time didn't know it was a lawsuit, what was going on, but it disappeared. So I had sort of mixed feelings about it because I always felt, oh, Mayer's system is so good. How come this system is out there and it's so popular, and what Mayer's doing is not as popular, not as successful? Then, of course, it all came crashing down. So
they did a lot more marketing, didn't they? They were on all the radio stations, TV stations. They had celebrity endorsements.
Yes, mainly radio commercials, but constantly. I listened to the radio a lot at that time because I was working in a photography studio and had a lot of free airtime, so to speak.
Okay.
So it was on every day. There was a lot of money put into radio commercials.
Okay.
And I finally, when we heard these questions, we was like, oh, we should really know what this is. So we started looking into it a little more. And it sounds like it's basically a lot of Bates exercise, simple Bates exercises.
It was what, 4 doctors?
It was originally 1 optometrist, a psychologist, a physicist, I believe, and some other PhD. I don't think they were all doctors.
Okay.
And they invented, or they wrote a book about vision improvement. And they took some from Bates. They took some positive affirmations. They modified some of the Bates stuff, which was using a light bulb instead of the sun. Which a lot of people involved in vision improvement try to do because it's handier, easier. And they reduced it down to about a 30-minute-a-day program.
Right.
One of the things that we both assumed from the fact that they were brought down, essentially, was that they were making outlandish promises, which actually they weren't, it didn't seem like.
Yeah, I figured that they were sort of get 20/20 vision in 2 weeks kind of people.
Yeah.
But it actually, it looks like they never really made those claims, and they even, I think, restricted it down to only those with glasses, and that if you had any other sort of condition, then it wasn't for you. So that was interesting. But so I think in summary, we could say it was some basic eye exercises.
Right.
But they did a bit of face massage.
Right.
Am I right in thinking that you mentioned acupuncture points?
Acupressure points, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
same thing, but yeah, using your fingers.
And some positive affirmations, looking at the psychology side of saying things like, I can see clearer. And
that was probably the psychologist who was involved in the first book that was probably his contribution, was to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think it was sort of a multidisciplinary, let's come up with this book to improve vision. It was sort of a harmless idea and then someone took that and tried to make it into a mega marketing phenomenon, and which they did.
Yeah.
But then they became a target to a certain degree. So.
And so how would you say then that our programs are different? Well,
part of what they were doing too was, we're going to appeal to the broadest audience and give a mass formula, or a simple formula, to a huge audience. And so they had to reduce things down to a minimum. And the whole thing of using a light bulb instead of the sun is a good example of, like, they compromised some things.
Okay.
That's my only critique of them. They made some compromises that they knew would make it more marketable and easier for people to do, that probably degraded the quality of what they were putting out. That's the only criticism I would have.
And I think actually we should say that what happened, I think that the judges of
Iowa. Yeah, it was a court that shut them down, really.
Okay. So I think they just decided that there wasn't enough substantial evidence.
Scientific proof.
Right. That they worked, so they just shut them down.
And one of the ironic things we discovered today was that there was actually a study. They took the method, and an optometrist in Sacramento did a study of 21 people, and only a 6-week period, 7 of them got significant improvements. Another 11 got moderate improvements. So that's a fairly good percentage in 6 weeks.
And then I think the article that we're reading, we won't mention their name, but they said that their company, that what they did is they had one of their staff members try the See Clearly method, and it didn't work.
But, and then they mentioned the fact that she was a mother and had no time to do the method, really.
But what they were saying is that the previous study, there wasn't enough scientific evidence, but this company's counter experiment was to get one of their staff members, probably the cleaning lady,
right,
to do these exercises. It didn't really do them, didn't work. So
that proves
don't work.
Proves it doesn't work. Even we're going to ignore this study in Sacramento where it did work,
which is couldn't be any more unscientific if they try. So so as far as being different concerned, then we're sort of talking a lot more about, here are some standard exercises.
Right.
Learn them, go away, adapt them to your life, see which ones work best. How does it work in your situation? If you're somebody with myopia and you work at the computer for 15 hours a day, then your exercises could be different from someone who works at the top of a lighthouse and spends 15 hours a day looking out at the ocean.
Yep.
So there's going to be a little bit difference there. We also, the See Clearly method, they talk about doing some massage on the face. And of course, we talk about, and obviously we got a lot from the Mir Schneider method of incorporating the whole body into the vision. Good blood flow is around the whole body. It's not just massaging the eyes. Think of it as a whole system. And we did a whole podcast series on this, understanding the holistic approach to vision improvement. So we recommend anybody that wants to know a bit more about that to go ahead and go back and listen to those exercises. So certainly increasing blood flow to the whole body, loosening the whole body up. I would imagine that we also pay a bit more attention to the psychological aspect of vision, as 90% of vision is through the brain. So certainly what they were trying to do with the affirmations, which is pretty genius, really. If you think about it, they were trying to do it on a real low level of gaining your confidence, and because so much of our vision is from the brain, that if you're convinced you can't see clearly in the distance, then you're just not going to.
Well, and the reality is, with clients of ours, one of the things we're dealing with is it's not clear. I can't see. This mental block about blurriness and progress.
And I think we did read a report about this, and I think the scientific argument is that no matter what you tell yourself, if you can improve the eye to see clearer, then regardless to how you feel you should see, should be irrelevant.
Right. Your mind should be irrelevant. Yeah.
Which just goes to show the scientific view that the brain is one study and it is separate from the body, and the body is separate, and vice versa. So, so certainly we might go into a little bit more depth into the psychological aspect. And I think probably that the largest part of our specific programs at Envision Self-Healing is that we're then looking at how to integrate those exercises into your daily life.
Because they really they wanted to appeal to a mass audience. So they said 30 minutes is probably all anyone will do. Mm-hmm. So, but they didn't take and we take the approach, we have to be realistic about the formal exercise period. Mm-hmm. But this integrative approach you're talking about means you can be potentially doing many hours of eye exercises if you integrate it into your daily life. Yeah. And that just increases the potency of what we're trying to do. So
and a good analogy is you could always do the training. For example, you could cycle. Say you're training for a cycle race. You can set a bike up in your garage, and you could spend a couple of hours a day cycling. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when you get out on the road and you're in a race, then it means that you're going to win that race. Yeah. You really want to try and work it into everyday examples. I guess the same as a kid, I used to always to do keep-ups in football or soccer in America. And as it proved, it doesn't necessarily mean that I was good enough to play for Man United or anything. Just because I could do those skills in the back garden doesn't mean I could go on a field and actually do the same thing and be at the same standard. Right. So it's important that you are able to take what you're doing in the exercises. For example, my peripheral vision exercises with my periphery. Well, I could really activate the periphery, for an hour, which is great. But then as soon as, and then jump on the computer and completely switch off from my central vision. Right. Then you're not incorporating it into your daily life. You're just switching those cells off again. Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, you may still maintain some improvements. You might. But not exactly what you could achieve if I was to sit at the computer and pay attention to my periphery, or when I'm walking to the shops, I pay attention to my periphery, or when I'm talking to someone, I'm paying it's always trying to maintain it. Another good example are people when they're trying to get rid of their glasses and they take their glasses off, and they're sitting at a meal and they can't really see the person's face in front of them. It's sort of a bit blurry. Mm-hmm. And instead of just being, it's blurry, these exercises aren't working, you shift from point to point, from eye to nose to ears. Mm-hmm. You could maybe look over their shoulder for a little bit of distance looking, look back in the face. There's all these things that you can do to incorporate the exercise into your daily life to help maintain and improve your vision that way. Yeah.
No, and it's a very good point. And so I guess to summarize, we, as we were just saying, we do the integrative approach to increase really the amount of time you're doing the exercises and to begin to blend them into your everyday life. Mm-hmm. We include nutrition in what we're about at Envision. Mm-hmm. We do a more holistic approach. They were trying to do the acupressure on the face, so they made an attempt at being more holistic. Yeah. But we take that way further in terms of massage. Yeah. And I think we are realistic that just doing 30 minutes a day may not be the trick for everybody. So
that it's enough to get somewhere, but just as we're talking about with the goals, like with the attainable that we talked about last week, what is it that you need to do to get there?
And the other thing they didn't say, but I think was implied behind all the criticism of it, was you should get to 2020. That should be everybody's goal, should be 2020. Okay. And we say, well, that for some people that is a realistic, attainable goal, and for some people it isn't. So we have to be real about that, and maybe they weren't being quite real. So
all right, great. Well, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you'd like to listen to a few more of these podcasts, then you can head over to our website at envisionselfhealing.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, then you could always just click the subscribe button, or if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can also subscribe on there. You could also find a little bit more information at envisionselfhealing.com on your own condition. Just go to the conditions tab, or if there's a specific exercise that you're interested in or you heard us talk about today, then you could head over to the exercise tab and you will find a whole list there just for you guys to listen to, read about, and practice some of the exercises and see if they're quite right for you. You could also download our free ebook called A Modern Day Guide for Improving Eyesight, where we talk a lot more about some of the basics of eye exercises and indeed how our modern day lives are actually impeding the good vision that we could have in our normal modern day life. You can also catch up with us on Facebook. Head over to our Facebook fan page, Envision Self-Healing, and like us over there and get involved in some more of the conversations and some of the questions that we've got going over there on Facebook. And you can also follow up with both Richard and I on Twitter, and we enjoy updating and sending out some tips and some quotes on our Twitter account to help keep everybody going with their vision improvement program. So good luck with your eye exercises this week, and happy healing.
And have a good week.